But oh, there's everybody's announcement. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. I know it's been a very, very hectic and confusing and stressful week for international students and for our office as well. We're doing our best to get the latest information out to you and to interpret it and figure out what it means for people at UNLV specifically. And there's a lot of moving parts. I just want to start by saying, again, I acknowledge what a stressful and anxiety-inducing time this is for international students, and you have my full support and full condolences. Condolences isn't the right word, I'm sorry, but you have my full support and that of the whole OISS office. We've actually been really impressed by how quickly the entire UNLV campus has rallied around this to try to help and find ways to support F1 students this fall. So everyone is really doing their absolute best because we do value you here. We want you to be able to study here, and we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. So with that being said, earlier this week, Monday, kind of took everyone by surprise. SCVP or ICE, parts of the same agency, did release their guidance for the fall 2020 semester that tells schools across the United States what the enrollment requirements are for all F1 international students. Now, getting the fall 2020 guidance was not a surprise. We've been waiting for that for some time. But the guidance that was in it was definitely shocking and pretty unexpected for what almost all schools in the country thought would be in that guidance. So in the guidance, they lay out a couple different models depending upon what your school is doing, because varies by state and by county. Online, fully.
And just as a note, the graphic isn't up, so I don't know if we started addressing that yet.
Oh, it's not?
No, all we see is your desktop.
Okay. Well, thanks for pointing that out because I thought it was sharing. Go back. Oh, I think it's because I moved it to my other window. Is it there?
Yes, now it is there.
Okay, I have two monitors, so if I switch it over, it stopped the screen share. I'm sorry. So thank you. That's okay. We were just right at the very beginning here. So the guidance points out a couple different models that schools have. UNLV is what's considered a hybrid school offering according to that SAVP guidance, because UNLV has many online classes this fall, but we also have a number of classes that have in-person components. So we're a hybrid school in that sense. And so the rules for schools in this hybrid situation like UNLV, according to the government right now, are that students need to be enrolled full-time, just as they would normally. So that's 12 credits for undergraduates, 9 credits for graduate students, 6 credits if you're a graduate student with a GA. But what they went on to say is that students in our situation at UNLV might have more online classes than usual, and that's okay. But the very important but, it cannot be 100% online. A student here in the US this fall at UNLV can't take 100% online classes. So you can take more online classes because that's what's being offered and that's going to be necessary for most of you to progress in your program because that's the way they're being taught. But you can't be 100% fully online if you're going to be in the US this fall. And that, of course, is different than the guidance we had in the spring and summer when this hit, and they lifted those restrictions. So that's the gist of the policy announcement that came out. So what's happened? All week, I referenced this at the beginning of this presentation, we've been talking with academic advising centers, with graduate coordinators, with admissions, with grad college, with all stakeholders across the campus to explain what this means for F1 students and to identify what sort of classes are going to count and are not going to count so that it can be a little more clear for you. And another piece of that guidance that was a little concerning is it more or less said, if a university goes to fully online, students would have to leave the country, even if that happens, middle of the semester, completely beyond students' control. Believe me, I understand this is not realistic for many, many reasons. There are travel restrictions in effect all over the place. There are quarantine rules all over the place. Many countries, it's next to impossible or prohibitively expensive to get a flight. There's all sorts of reasons why that isn't realistic, and so it caused some real concern. So we've been talking about this with our leadership, and we are very strongly committed to finding ways to help F1 students maintain their status this fall, regardless of what happens with COVID as the semester unfolds. So UNLV is still officially hybrid this fall. We do officially have classes that count as fulfilling this in-person requirement. And even if things adjust, because this is a changing situation, right? I mean, just yesterday, Nevada, more business types closed again. We understand things might change depending upon the course of the virus, but whatever happens, we're going to be trying to ensure there are ways for F1 students to maintain their status here this fall. And that's a real high priority for us. And we're working with all the colleges to make sure that's a reality. So the first questions that we began to get from students and advisors, understandably, is what is online and what is on campus for F1 status purposes, because there's all sorts of different, names and designations of my UNLV. So it's easier to frame that question as what does not count as an in-person class. So the classes that do not count as in-person for F1 purposes are any classes in my UNLV that are designated as online, or it usually says web-based. Those are classes that were already online before COVID-19 ever happened. They're still considered online now. Also, courses that are listed as remote. When you look at the class, and I believe it's under location, I think, or format offering, it says remote. That is also an online class. Virtually any other class other than those two offered at UNLV is going to count as an in-person class for F1 purposes. So if you're in almost any other type of class, you're going to be able to fulfill that requirement. All right, the class has to have some measure of face-to-face component. That can mean a lot of different things for different kinds of classes. Some courses may actually meet once or twice a week. Some might meet once or twice a month. Some might have lab components that have to be in person, exams. There's a lot of different ways in which a course can fulfill that in-person component, okay? But if it's not online and if it's not remote, it should qualify as an in-person class because it will have some measure of physical face-to-face component. And again, F1 students that are going to be here this fall need to take at least one of those classes, all right? We understand you're not going to be probably able to take all your classes that way because there's just not as many offerings as there were in last semesters. As far as enrolling in these classes, obviously you still want to work closely with your academic advisor at the undergrad level or your graduate coordinator or faculty advisor at the graduate level when you're discussing changing your schedule, adding a class, moving stuff around because of this new requirement. To that effect, in this infographic that's on our social media, all of you should have gotten an email about this form yesterday, the Fall 2020 Enrollment Verification Form. We've asked all current F1 students at UNLV to complete this with your academic advisor or graduate coordinator or faculty advisor. And this is our way of being able to document and prove to the government that you're meeting that requirement, that you have at least one class or more with the face-to-face component. So all of you are being asked to please fill this out as soon as possible with your planned enrollment for this fall. Send this to your advisor to have them. I mean, it's really a joint process. You should work on this together, but they absolutely need to sign it and review it. And then that comes to us. And what happens next, once we get that form, is our office will actually issue each of you an updated I-20. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but go ahead, Talitha.
So just as a note, guys, we're after this FAQ event, we will be sending out a blast email to all of our active F1 students with this form attached.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it had gone out yesterday. So today you'll be getting a blast, it sounds like, with this form.
Yeah.
I think a handful of you might have gotten it sent individually if you asked for it. So the rest of you will be getting it.
If you check our social media, there should be a tiny URL link that'll also help you get to the form, but we will be sending a blast email out today with it attached.
Perfect. Thank you. So you fill out that form with your advisor. They sign off on it, verifying you'll meet this requirement, and that comes back to our office. What happens next is our office is actually being told by the government to issue you a new I-20 once we get this form back. And the I-20 will actually have a remarks, a comment section on the first page towards the bottom. And we will have a note in there saying, this student is not fully enrolled in online classes. This student is meeting the in-person minimum required by the government. That way, for students who may be traveling or who are just here in general, they have proof because the government's enforcement of this, they don't have a way necessarily to know which students with I-20s are at online schools and which schools have hybrid offerings like this and they're taking classes. So we'll actually be sending you electronically, as we've been doing since roughly March, an updated I-20 that has this information. This is especially important for potential new students who might be trying to get a visa. You're probably going to be asked for this I-20. So I know our counterparts in undergrad and grad admissions are going to be sending out communication to send you this updated I-20 for visa application purposes. It's obviously especially important if you're someone who's currently overseas and was planning on trying to return to the US for the fall semester. I know there's complications with travel requirements and whatnot. But you'll probably be the highest priority to get this sent to you right away because you're going to need that for travel to the US. All students should have it, but priority is for those that are going to need it to actually enter a US port of entry for the fall. So along with that, another part of the guidance, which is confusing and frustrating, is it pertains to people that are outside the US right now, current students that are outside the US. A lot of individuals this past spring or over the summer may have obviously returned home. A lot of people go home over the summer anyways, and especially during this uncertain time, we know many students have left the country, and that's normal. Unfortunately, what the current guidance says is that if you're a UNLV student who's outside the country this fall and you're not able to come back to meet this requirement to take at least one or more classes on campus, you can certainly still take online classes from overseas, but the government's requiring that the F1 status, the I-20 record in SEVIS get ended. All right. Now, I know that's frustrating. It's not something we were hoping for, but that's what the guidance says right now. Now, if you're in that situation, all hope is not lost. Don't panic. We're going to do everything we can. For many of you, it may be possible for us to reactivate the I-20 for you to come the next semester. So if you're in that boat right now, you don't think you can get here, our hope is that later this fall, we'll be able to reactivate many of these I-20s so you get to keep the same SEVIS record. So there's no new SEVIS fee. That's obviously much better when it comes to things like CPT, OPT. However, I have to say, as with all the uncertainty we've had, we don't quite know yet if we'll be able to reactivate all of these. Historically, there's been a rule of if you're outside the country for 5 months or more. There were some suggestions that that would be more flexible with people that had left in spring, for example, because of COVID-19, but we don't have concrete answers from the government yet. What I will say on a personal opinion, keep in mind, this is a question about what for the spring semester. Quite honestly, I think that the results of the election in November, which happens before that spring semester, may in part answer that question as far as how easy it is to reactivate these I-20s. I don't know. That's speculation on my part. So we're going to do the best we can, but people who are overseas are going to have to essentially take a leave of absence in an immigration sense, not necessarily from the school, because you can certainly still take online classes, full or part-time, depending upon what your department has offered. But your I-20 status, you will need a leave of absence. So that email that Talitha mentioned earlier, that sounds like it's going out this afternoon, is going to include also a leave of absence form, which some of you have seen in the past. It's just a simple one-page document asking, when do you plan to return? When did you leave, et cetera, and then we'll update your immigration record with that. I do want to stress for those in that situation, it is not a negative termination. We use that word and people get scared. It's something called termination for authorized early withdrawal, meaning that this termination was allowed. It was authorized by the school. So it's not a negative termination that, puts a bad mark on your immigration record or anything like that. But it is understandably frustrating and more work to try to work through for folks to be able to come back in the spring. So we're keeping our eyes on that. I will say there was a little bit of uncertainty with this process because the announcement came out Monday and then a separate document was published by the government Tuesday, which was a little bit contradictory about this topic. And we haven't gotten a final resolution from the government as to what exactly is right. But we believe, as of today, that you would have to take a leave of absence for your CVIS record. So we'll be asking you to send us that form instead if you're outside the US and won't be coming back for the fall or can't come back for the fall.
Jason, as a
Yes.
quick note before we move on to the next, everyone asking questions in the chat, we do see your questions, but as more questions come in, we're getting a little mixed up and it's getting a little chaotic. If you have questions that are specific to your situation, meaning that like you as an individual are like from Canada, Korea, China, what have you, and you have questions about how you specifically can either go fully online if you need to take a leave of absence, please direct those questions in email to either oiss@unlv.edu or your specific OISS advisor. For the more general questions that are appearing in the chat, we'll be able to answer those after we get through the initial slides.
Awesome. Yes, thank you very much. I almost skipped over this, but I'll mention real quick because we're on the topic of people returning back to the US. There is a general reminder on this graphic here. You can never get this reminder enough of what you need to return. So you will need your I-20. In this case, it will be an updated I-20 we talked about with the remarks saying that you have on-campus classes. You need to have a valid F1 visa, unless you're a visa exempt Canadian citizen, and a passport with a minimum of 6 months remaining on it from your date of entry. Okay. All right, I think I more or less talked about the information on this slide already. That's again just saying if you're outside the US and unfortunately unable to get back because of travel restrictions, flight unavailability, whatever the case might be, the process is the leave of absence for your I-20 record. And then academically, of course, contact your department, your advisor to talk about what online classes you might be able to take this fall. There are obviously much more online classes than there were last fall. There are probably courses you could continue taking to make some progress in your program until we can hopefully see you back here face-to-face soon, potentially the next semester. Now, I want to say a couple other things because we've gotten lots of questions about this. This slide here, I'm not going to read it to you, but once again, we're doing everything we can to advocate for how important you are to our campus, to our city, to the state of Nevada. You are extremely valued persons on our campus. You contribute a lot. And I don't just mean in a monetary sense. I mean to the educational mission of our campus. You're extremely important and we want you to be here. To that end, I already said we're talking with all of campus leadership about ways we can support you. There is a lot of political advocacy and pushback all across the country about this issue. Because it's not just UNLV, just about every school in the country was outraged at this. Particularly our neighbors next door in California, which represents a huge number of the students and schools in this country. This impacted them in a terrible way. So there are already several court cases asking a judge to at least postpone this order, to stay it until it can be decided because of the harmful impacts it has to students and to schools. Literally in a matter of days, there's been more lawsuits added to that. I heard just yesterday, I think the California system is starting a lawsuit. Before that was Harvard, MIT. There's something called an amicus brief that I think many schools across the country are signing on to, saying we support this lawsuit. We want to add our weight to the argument. I'm doing everything I can, working with our staff at UNLV to see how we can put some pressure to try to help our lawmakers understand how important you are to our state, to our school, to our city, to our state. So we are doing everything we can. And of course, I don't know what the future holds, but we're going to keep doing that, right? Because you're valued and we want you to be here on campus. With that being said, I'm going to turn off the screen share for a second. Oh, quick recap, because I feel like I've talked about a lot of stuff. So watch again for the email this afternoon. If you're a continuing student, you should be getting this with instructions to get it filled out with your advisor, send it to us, or to send us the leave of absence form if you feel you're not going to be able to get back here. For new fall admits who might be working with undergrad or graduate admissions, that communication is also coming out. That'll come from admissions or grad level admissions in the near future. So stand by, that is coming. So that being said, let me turn this portion off. And I'm assuming a lot of chat questions have kind of been answered. Is there anything maybe generic that Talitha or any of the advisors have seen in chat that we want to address, questions that keep coming up?
I've noticed
Right.
that quite a few students are wanting to make sure that at least just one credit on campus will count to keeping them in status.
So what we have told the advisors and what I will tell you is that if at all possible, this should be a standard, 3-credit class that you would otherwise be taking as part of your degree plan, if at all possible. However, there are going to be cases where that simply isn't available, or it's not offered in your program, and we'll be as flexible as we can within the law to allow that. So this is why we want you to talk with your advisor about the form and see, is there a normal, regular 3-credit class part of your degree program that you can take, because that's what the regulation wants students to try to do. It says students should be taking kind of the minimum number of online classes. So that's a little bit of a vague answer, but technically a 1-credit class can count, but you need to work with your advisor to see if it's possible to have a more standard 3-credit class that's part of your degree plan. I'm looking through chat too. Is there any kind of other general things we should be talking about?
The other very common question that is popping up is what happens if classes are changed to remote last minute, or if UNLV is closed in the middle of the semester and goes back to being remote.
Yes, and I definitely understand that concern, because the guidance said if you're a student in this situation, you're starting out here this fall, and maybe a week before the semester, or maybe 2 or 3 months into the semester, your class goes online, you have to leave, which again is not realistic or at all fair in our opinion. We've had this conversation many, many times over the past week with deans, with provosts, with all of INSHE is having this conversation. And what I can tell you right now is we are definitely putting plans into place to make sure we'll be able to help you keep your status if and when that occurs. So I have a very high degree of confidence that whatever the case may be, if more classes end up shifting online, we're going to have provisions in place to allow international students to still meet this requirement. I'm sure many of you might have been seeing on the news, schools all around the country are doing all sorts of creative things to try to make sure that their students can stay here legally based on this guidance. And UNLV is in that same boat. We're working on a plan. We're going to have a plan to make sure you'll be able to do something that meets the bill of the fall 2020 enrollment requirements to maintain in the U.S., even if that happens with our classes this fall.
Jason, another question that I've been seeing in the chat is when we will be issuing new I-20s for those people who are outside of the U.S. trying to get in, and those who are already in the U.S.
Right. So as you mentioned, Talitha, the email is going out, I think, this afternoon. You should get it. If you don't get that today, please let us know. We're going to work as fast as we can, but understand that this is going to go out to, I think, over 800 students, and we have to make those I-20s. It'll take a little bit of time. If you tell us in your email, it would be very helpful if you tell us, for example, I have a flight and I'm returning on July 15th. Well, that's really quick, so maybe not, but I have a flight scheduled for this date, or I have a visa appointment scheduled for this date. That will help us to know to try to prioritize that and process it faster. Our internal deadline is to try to get all these processed really this month, over the month of July. But again, there are 800 of these or more, and it's contingent upon when we get them from you and your advisors. So it'll be very helpful, and correct me if I'm wrong, Talitha, but when you send the email to OISS or to your advisor with the attachment, to maybe put a line in the top saying, hey, I have a flight on X date, so we know to try to get that processed by that time.
Or if you have a visa renewal appointment as well, because you will need this updated I-20 for visa renewals and also for travel.
Absolutely. So we'll do the best we can to get those out.
Also, guys, please note that the most recent I-20s that you guys currently have, yes, they're valid, but if you are outside the US or you're trying to get a visa renewal appointment, if you bring the I-20 that you have right now to the border or to the embassy, they will not accept it as is. It needs to have the remark on your I-20 explaining that UNLV is a hybrid with in-person classes and that you are enrolled in at least one in-person class.
So it's very important that you work with your academic advisors to get this form filled out and submitted to us with all the information, letting us know that you're traveling, that you need the visa renewal, so we can get this to you so you don't waste your time and your money trying to enter the country and get turned away. If you're inside the US and you're not planning on traveling internationally, we do still need to update this, but we don't have as much of a time limit to get it to you personally if you're going to stay in the US. We will still get it done as quickly as we can. Just keep in mind, there's really only about 3 or 4 of us, and there's almost 1,000 of you guys. So just please be understanding. We're trying to get through it as quickly as we can.
And as a note, I have been getting some of the fall 2020 enrollment forms already. Please make sure when you submit that form to our office that it is signed at the bottom by your academic advisor at your advising center for your specific college. If it is not signed at the bottom by some academic advisor, or if you're a graduate student, your department chair, faculty advisor, or your grad coordinator, we cannot accept it and we cannot process your request. Keep that in mind.
Yep. So please send it to your advisor first. And then from there, it doesn't matter if your advisor wants to forward it or they can give it to you and you send it back to us. Either way, it's fine, but it does need to have your advisor's signature. I saw a couple other, sorry, go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to put on a caveat, but if you are outside the US, it probably would be best to come from you because you can tell us what your plans are so that we can act accordingly. Your academic advisor may not know that, and so it would take us longer to process.
All right, a couple other questions I saw real quick. One was about spring 2021 and the format of classes. I got to tell you, nobody has a crystal ball, so we don't know. We certainly hope spring 2021 is a lot more normal by now, but that's 5 months from now, and we just can't really say at this point. There aren't any plans for what that will look like. Obviously, we want it to be in person for spring. Lots going to happen over the next 5 months.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say someone else also asked about the DMV and if they would accept the I-20 that you have right now. My guess is probably yes, because the DMV is generally not 100% up to speed on all these latest SCVP things, but it would probably be better to try to get this I-20 before you go to the DMV just in case. But the SEVIS record should be the same, so they should probably allow it. And then one other thing, sorry, I wanted to address, somebody asked about dissertation thesis credits and if those are in person. So first of all, make sure your advisor fills that out. And 2, remember, if it's not an online, web-based, or remote course, that should count, with the understanding that your dissertation or thesis should have some type of in-person component, whether it's an occasional check-in or meeting or something like that. But yes, in general, thesis dissertation should count for an in-person class because it's not considered by UNLV to be online, web-based, or remote, so it should count.
I know.
Oh, Leslie, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, for those of you that are new students, if you're not able to return to the US or enter the US in time for classes, you can still take classes online. Just make sure to work with the admissions office to defer your I-20 so that you do not have to pay a new SEVIS fee. So there's nothing that says that you cannot take classes in your home country in this situation. It's just will affect what happens with your I-20. So as soon as you know you cannot enter, contact Lori, contact Renee, depending on if you're a graduate student or undergraduate student, so that you can get your I-20 updated for spring semester.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm just going through more questions. People asked about if your visa expires in the US. That's a generic question. That's always okay. The actual visa stamp can expire as long as you have an I-20 that's valid in the US and your I-94 still shows F1 status. The visa stamp is not an issue. That's only a problem with travel. People ask about the August 4th because some of you might have seen that in the guidance. Yes, our office is striving to get all these I-20s issued by August 4th. Obviously, that depends upon all of you students sending your information to us beforehand. So it is our goal to get all of these issued and sent out by August 4th to the best of our ability, depending upon our capacity and when we get this information from you. Okay, if we get a form from you at 11:59 p.m. on August 3rd, you're not going to have an I-20 on August 4th, but we'll still send it to you as fast as we can afterwards. Okay. Someone else also asked a similar question about transfer. So that will be with admissions or with undergrad admissions. Sounds like this is undergrad admissions. When you should transfer your I-20, I don't think it's going to matter if you do it before or after then. Admissions is going to be asking for the same verification form when they issue an I-20 anyways. I would go ahead and do it before August 4th, probably, but talk with admissions and with your other school. Somebody also asked about OISS opening. Let me just be clear, OISS has never stopped working at all during this time. In fact, a couple of our staff are at the office right now. You might be able to tell via webcam. We're still working 100% remotely. Let me rephrase that. We are working 100% of the time, with some of us working remotely, some of us working in the office, some of us coming in and out as time requires. I do not have a timeline on exactly when we'll be open for face-to-face appointments, but it doesn't matter. You can still do the same appointments and the same processes with us right now, scheduling online for an appointment, WebEx or Zoom or Google Meets. So we're still working for you. I don't have a timeline on when we'll be physically open for face-to-face meetings. Okay.
Jason, can you address quarantining as well if students are outside the U.S. and they're able to enter the U.S.?
Right. So the federal CDC guidelines recommend that any international visitor, even a U.S. citizen who goes abroad and returns from international travel, should self-quarantine for 14 days. What we have been told by campus residential services is that if you are living in on-campus housing, if you're living in the dorms, that you would need to self-quarantine upon arrival for 14 days. And my understanding is that they have some contacts with some local nearby hotels that they would share with you. But that is UNLV's Residential Life's official stance, and that is based on federal CDC guidance, which we have no control over, frankly. I have no control over it, so I'm not going to speak to I'm just not going to speak to it. We don't have control over it, so that's the policy for UNLV Residential Life right now. So you do need to plan for that. Probably communicate with professors if that means you might miss something in person at the beginning. Obviously, tell them in advance. I'm certain they'll be understanding and allow you to make that up.
Jason, I have a question regarding CPT and how this is going to affect the students who decide to take this fall off.
So that depends in part on whether or not we're able to reactivate the I-20 later this fall. So for those that are unable to come, somebody who has an I-20 that's in active status right now, who's outside the country or won't be able to be here this fall, as I mentioned earlier, we likely have to have that terminated for leave of absence. And our hope is that later this fall, we'll be able to reactivate it. The government will allow us to use that same I-20 and come back. If that's the case, then you keep the same I-20 record, then your CPT requirements really aren't any different. There's no change to your CPT requirements before it happened compared to after you get back, if we can reactivate the I-20. If it turns out we have to issue a new I-20 with a new CVIS ID number, then students may have to refulfill the 1 academic year requirement, which is 2 full-time semesters to do CPT. So a big part of that question is still unknown because we don't know how readily we'll be able to reactivate I-20s this fall. And as soon as we know, we will tell you. Keep in mind, again, all of this is very uncertain. Some of the guidance Tuesday didn't agree with all the guidance Monday. I mentioned there's a lot of lawsuits. For all we know, this could dramatically change course if a judge makes the decision in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll be sending a brand new round of communication to you about what the status is. But this is where we're at today, July 10th at 11:34 Pacific time, subject to change after that. Okay. I understand that's frustrating. It's not anybody's preference. It's not my preference either. But we just have to operate on what we know today. Let's see here.
Would there be any chance to register for 1 credit courses in case like you go fully online? Because registration will be closed at that point, supposedly.
So again, that conversation has been had with the deans and with the provost, and the final details are not in place. But there will be a plan that's going to allow students to meet their status. I don't know if it's going to mean a 1 credit class. I know some schools across the country have done something like that. Others are taking different approaches. There will be a plan is what I can tell you and assure you. I can't tell you what the details of the plan are. We're 3 days after announcement, 4 days after the announcement, and we don't know what fall is going to be like. But the plan is being discussed at the highest levels of UNLV.
Great, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
One other thing that we might want to address is, yes, the majority, like the guidance says that students should go home if they're not able to enroll in an on-campus course. But another thing that they had mentioned was a student could try to transfer to another school that has in-person classes, so like an English language program or something like that for the fall semester if they're not able to return home and they're not able to get classes here. Now, UNLV is working to find classes for every international student, but if something happens, you could potentially transfer as well to maintain your F1 status. But if you're worried about it, just come see us, email us, schedule an appointment, give us a phone call, and we'll see what we can do to help.
I do have a question regarding that. I had a student who emailed me asking if they are taking 12 credits and they have three classes, so 9 credits at UNLV that are online, but they have 1 in-person class at CSN. Are we accepting those concurrent enrollments? Will that count?
I don't even know if we've addressed that yet, but I think yes, if we had proof that there was an in-person class that UNLV was going to be accepting for their degree plans, I think yes. Whoever asked that question, can you email that to us so we can look into it? That is, I'll be honest, we haven't even addressed that situation yet. There's been a lot going on in 3 or 4 days. So please email it to us and we'll get you a decisive answer on that. Something else I saw, again, people are asking about the deadline by 3rd or 4th. Yes, that is still when we're supposed to issue these I-20s is by the 4th, whether you're in or outside the US. But again, I'll repeat, we're going to do it as quickly as we can, depending upon when we get it from you. So whether you're in the US or outside the US, bottom line is please get it filled out with your advisor as soon as possible, signed by them and sent to us so we can try to meet that August 4th deadline for you and get you the I-20. We'll do it as fast as we can. What else is here? Online. Thesis dissertation, we got that question earlier, but I'll say again, if a class is not designated as online, web-based, or remote in my UNLV, then it should count as in-person because UNLV does not consider it to be online unless it's web-based, online, or remote. The assumption is any other class type will have some sort of in-person requirements, whether it's an occasional meeting or lab work that you might do on campus occasionally or something to that effect. So yes, thesis dissertation credits should typically count for an in-person class for the fall semester. Minimum requirements. So the guidance does still require the same minimums as before for people that are maintaining status here. So 12 credits undergraduates, 9 credits graduates, 6 credits graduates with assistantships. The requirements for reduced course load are also still the same as they were before COVID. So for example, if you are graduating this fall semester and you only need 1 or 2 classes, you can apply for reduced course load just as you would have done in previous semesters. You give us a proof of graduation, we can authorize that. In very limited circumstances, there's also provisions for a medical reduced course load if you have medical recommendation that you cannot take these credits. So all the rules about full-time number of credits, total number of credits, are still the same as they were before. Let's see here. The question about advanced parole, you should email us about that because that's a very complex topic and it depends upon the details of your case.
I think there were a couple of students that came in late, and so they didn't hear about if they're like outside their home country. So you might want to touch on that again.
Sure. So recap. All of you should be getting, well, all continuing students should get an email later today, and new admits for new programs this fall, I think you'll be getting an email very soon also, maybe today or early next week. And it's going to tell you if you're a student here right now, there's a fall 2020 enrollment form you need to get filled out with your advisor. If you're a student who's outside the US this fall and you're unable to get back for the fall semester to take in-person classes, you're going to be asked in the email to fill out a leave of absence form and send that to us. And that leave of absence form means we're going to update your F1 record for the leave of absence and close it this semester with the hope that we can reactivate it for a future term like spring semester when you can come back. I want to be very clear though, whenever I say leave of absence, I'm talking about for your immigration record. You can still absolutely take online classes from overseas, whether or not you have an active F1 record. That doesn't impact your ability to take online classes from outside the US. That's still fine. So you can still talk with your advisors, your coordinators, your department to talk about what online classes you might want to do, either full or part-time, even if you can't come back here in person and don't have an F1 record this semester. Again, people talking about having room in in-person classes for international students. All this information has gone to all the academic advising units across campus, so they understand that international students need to meet this requirement. And indications are that departments are going to be very flexible and helpful to make sure we can get you into at least one of these classes. So talk with your advisor. I'm highly confident they will find something for you. And if they can't, let us know and we'll do whatever we can to try to facilitate that. Okay. If you're a transfer student, you don't know who your advisor is. If you start with admissions, they can absolutely direct you to who your advisor is. Yes. So if you're working with undergrad admissions, probably Renee Castaneda, who might even be in this chat, I'm not sure. They can direct you to whoever your academic advisor is for sure.
Jason, can you go over one more time, because I see this question coming in a lot, is the in-person class requirement for fall 2020. Can we just cover that again?
Yeah, sure. So take a look also at the infographic post that we put on social media yesterday that explains this, but basically I'll say what is not in person. If a class says in my UNLV that it is online, web-based, or remote, then that means it does not count for in-person class. But any other classes should count as in-person classes, okay? So you need a class that is not listed as online, web-based, remote. You need to have one or more of those classes. Because any other class type, according to UNLV's rules, should have some sort of in-person component. It's designated as not online, not web-based, not remote. That's the sort of class that you need. So it's easier to define what does not count than to define what does count. There's fewer of those. And this is also why we have this form, because your advisor is going to help designate on there, is it an in-person class? Okay, because it can be confusing. I understand that. That's why we have this form that you and your advisor fill out to determine if you might have to adjust your schedule. Okay.
So Jason, hypothetically, if I'm an undergraduate student and I'm enrolled in 12 credits, if I have 9 credits, which are either remote or online, and I have a 3-credit in-person class, I'm fine, right?
Yeah, that sounds perfectly fine. Yep. And so have your advisor fill out the form saying that you've got at least one in-person class, and that sounds like no problem. Let's see.
Jason, sorry, let me just interrupt for a second. I have been answering the question, so I haven't been listening as intently as I should have been. Did you mention, can you go over what students will do if this is their final semester?
I was about to actually say that.
Yeah, so just like in past semesters, even if COVID-19 wasn't going on, there are rules that allow F1 students to take less than full time if it's their final semester. So if you were planning to graduate this fall, let's say, and maybe you only have 2 classes left, or maybe you only have 1 class left, you can still get a reduced course load permission to do that. So on our website, we have a form called Proof of Graduation. Very similar to the fall 2020 form, actually, that just says what classes do you need left to graduate, when are you going to graduate. So your advisor fills that out with you, sign it, they send it to us, and you can have permission to take fewer than the normal 12, 9, or 6, depending upon what status you're at. The one thing I will say about that, though, let's say, for example, you are an undergraduate who normally needs 12 credits, but you only have 6 credits left to graduate. That's okay. You get permission for 6 credits, but according to this guidance, you will still need to have one of those classes be on campus. So that's an important consideration. Even if you have fewer total number of classes, you still need to have at least one in-person class according to the rules published on Monday. Okay.
Another common question that I've seen that's been popping up is whether or not internship classes count as in-person. So I'm assuming that some of them are hospitality students and others are probably.
So I need to look at the format, but I would assume that it counts as in person. I don't know if it's designated in my UNLV as online or remote or web-based. I actually,
I remember HND 450 has always been online, so I just don't know about the other internship classes.
okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know from context which unit this is. So that would be a really good question to email our office and specifically to also email your academic advisor with that form, because I don't know which department it is and how it's designated in my UNLV and if it has in-person requirements. So for that internship question, very good question. Bring that up with your academic advisor when you have them fill out the fall 2020 form, and we can find out if that's designated as in person or not. Department arranged. So if it's listed as department arranged, it should probably qualify as in person. But on that form that your advisor fills out, it actually asks them whether there's any in-person components, and they can add notes, so they'd be able to clarify that. They're the experts on those class formats more than we are for the entire university. So my answer is probably yes, but I'll need you to either email us to confirm, or better yet, send that form to your advisor to discuss with them and find out if that's in person. But it sounds like it would qualify as in person to me.
Another question that I'm seeing pop up a bit is what will happen if a student is living in a dorm and it's shut down in the middle of the semester?
Well, that is a great question, and it's something that we will have to defer to residential life. But if you look back at spring semester, I believe what happened is they tried to help as many people as possible find alternative arrangements. But I think if students were entirely unable to make different accommodations, they still allowed students to remain in the dorms. And my assumption is that that would still be the case for fall semester. It's not my call to make, and we'll have to check with them, but I believe they would operate the same way they did in spring, which is to try to find alternative arrangements, but still have that backup available if there's no other option for you. Okay, the question seems to have maybe slowed a little bit.
For new or returning students that have new SEVIS numbers and they just pay the I-901 SEVIS fee, as long as you defer your admission within, I would say, the first 30 days of the semester, you will keep that new SEVIS number and you will not have to pay the SEVIS fee again. So in this situation, and really in any situation where you think you might have to defer admissions, you will need to be in communication with the admissions office fairly quickly to make sure that you keep that number and you don't have to pay the fee again.
Yeah. There was also a question about if someone fills out this form, let's say 9 credits, but then they get a GA and drop to 3 credits, would you need to get it? So our goal is to only have you complete this form once to document that you have 1 or more on-campus classes right now. If you change your enrollment after that, you shouldn't need to send us this new form. You would just need to make sure that you, 1, are still meeting the full-time requirements. And in the example in this question, you would be, because if you had a GA at 6 credits, that's still okay. 2, you would need to make sure if you drop anything that you still have that at least that 1 in-person class, right? So if you do adjust your enrollment, you should not remove the 1 single in-person class you have. But as far as the form, no, unless we have to do otherwise, according to government mandates, we don't plan to repeat this process other than this one time. And then you'll just need to make sure you do not drop the class afterwards. Somebody is asking about graduate assistantships and remote working. That's a question I think I might defer a little bit to the graduate college, and I know some of them are in the chat, so I don't know if they want to address that in chat or not. I know it's a conversation that is, I think, still developing and depends on some more decisions that are yet to be made. I don't have a conclusive answer on graduate assistantship employment ability if someone is outside of the US right now. So you might want to connect with us via email if you don't get an answer in the chat, and we'll work with grad college to get that resolved. I don't think there's a definitive answer yet.
And just quick thing. So with 10 minutes left to go in this meeting, I just want to let everyone know that if you have any additional questions that we weren't able to get to during this live event, please feel free to email us. Also keep in mind that we will be sending an email blast with the fall verification form and the temporary leave of absence form. We will all today, probably this afternoon. And on Monday, we'll be issuing a new graphic on our social media, and we'll also email that out to our students that'll have in addition to what the slides were, additional boxes with common FAQ questions, just because this is a very long event. Say we did answer your question, but like a week, 2 weeks from now you forget, at least it's written down somewhere. Sorry, Leslie, I just wanted to get that out.
No, that's very good. And it looks like Dean Corrigan did answer about the graduate assistantships in the chat, so there's information there as well.
One thing that I wanted to address that I think some students may not have heard. So keep in mind, as an international student, you have two records basically here at UNLV. You have your academic record and your immigration record. What we're talking about affects your immigration record. So if you're not able to get an in-person classes, you can either transfer or go home, or if you're outside your home country, you would do a leave of absence, and that basically pauses or moves your immigration record. Your academic record, if you're still like in your home country, sorry, am I not making sense, Jason?
No, sorry, I'm reading another question. That's what switch questions are for. You're okay.
To answer the question, like if you're taking classes in your home country, your immigration record is paused, but your academic record is still going. You're still making progress towards your degree. We're just trying to pause your immigration to keep it active if we can. So you're going to be keeping track of two records, basically. And if you have questions about it, please email us. We'll try and explain it better. We just have a very short amount of time.
Yeah, and I saw there was another question similar to earlier about potentially doing an in-person class elsewhere and then more here. And again, we hadn't even addressed that prior today because it's only been a couple days. We haven't thought of every contingency. But the question posed here, I think specifically would not be permissible. You couldn't do one in-person class in a different state entirely and do the rest online. That would not fulfill the in-person requirement. So in general, you're going to need to have it here. I said it might be possible at a local school at CSN here. We'll need to that if the interested student could contact us. In general, that in-person class is going to need to be here at UNLV and not at a different institution, because this is where your I-20 record is housed.
Jason, as we wrap up, could I add a couple things?
Yeah, please do.
So first off, everybody, I'm Ross. I'm the executive director of OISS. This has been an incredibly challenging week as we navigate this very tough guidance. I can tell by the chat, we knew this is causing a lot of stress for everyone. I just want to tell you once again, the entire community at UNLV has risen to the occasion to work together to ensure that you are all covered. You're not put into a bind of having to try to, in the middle of the semester, go home. I'd like to reiterate that the plan is that we are going to be in a hybrid mode for the campus with classes available face-to-face. If the virus gets worse and things change, we got a commitment from the deans and the provost and grad school that we will still continue to provide in-person classes to ensure everyone has an opportunity to be in compliance, okay? So as best we can, we're trying to reassure you. We're hopeful this thing will get turned over. We're acting as if we're going to be stuck with this, and we're trying to have a plan that serves to ensure that you are not impacted if at all possible, okay? And again, I apologize that we're in this mess. But, I'm really proud of the fact that we're all working together to make sure you're taken care of. Anyway, that's what I wanted to add.
Very good. No, I would echo those sentiments. I know it's been a really tough week. It's really been a tough couple of months, even years, honestly, for international education in the U.S., and that's not lost on us. So all I can tell you is we're here for you. The campus is here for you. We're going to do everything we personally can to support your success here, and we'll keep on doing that regardless of what happens the next couple of months.
And just to reiterate, as we get these forms, we will be emailing I-20s. Usually in the past, we are not allowed to do that, but they've made they've given us permission to do that now. They understand that people cannot actually go physically into the office. So we will be emailing them.
And yes, by the way, last question I think I saw there, I believe all the INCHE schools have a similar hybrid plan. And yes, independent studies are generally considered in person. Okay, I keep saying last question, but I think that's actually the last question. For anything else that comes up, please, again, email us or email our counterparts in admissions or grad college as well. And thanks a lot to those that have been in the chat helping us field those questions. It's been really great. So thank you all for attending. We will be posting a recorded version of this presentation as soon as possible on our YouTube. So we'll post that on social media. If you have friends or colleagues that couldn't make it today, please help us get the word out. And the general reminder I always put out there, please check your emails from us, especially right now. This is very important for updates. And if you can, follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at UNLV OISS. We keep on putting this information out there as well. So that's usually the first place you'll get it. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Hang in there, keep your chin up, and we will get through this together, okay? Thank you all. Take care.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.